Hey there, welcome to the Recharge Biomedical podcast. I'm Dr. Edward Park, and if you're curious about regenerative medicine, you've come to the right place. We're diving into the latest breakthroughs in telomerase activation, stem cell exosomes, and all the cutting-edge science that's shaping the future of healing and longevity. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to the Recharge Biomedical podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Park, and today we're very lucky to be joined by Dr. Scott Martin. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Dr. Park. How are you, handsome?
Good, thanks. So, as it happens, I was on Facebook doom scrolling several months ago, and I said, "Oh, Dubai! I'd like to go see Dubai." So I went to Dubai, and I met Scott, who was lecturing. He gave a couple of brilliant lectures, and then for some reason they liked the cut of my jib or the book, so they said, "Why don't you lecture too?" So a month ago or so, we were in Cancun, and he was on the dais, the stage, and I was talking, and we had a good time and got to drink tequila and sing mariachi and learn more from each other. But I think I learned more from him than vice versa. So I'm very happy to know you.
I think everyone should know that the esteemed Professor Park gave his entire lecture, two of them in Spanish.
That's right.
It was absolutely stupendous. Very impressive.
Well,
very
thank
humbling
you so
as
much.
well.
I mean, thank you so much. It was on the wake of some cognitive decline from my fire in the apartment. It wasn't great, but I probably only lost 10 words, and so they were really fun to interact with. So today I thought we could cover things that come up a lot for both patients and for doctors, and you excel in the latter. You have a Facebook group called the Institute of Regenerative Education, mainly aimed at practitioners, and it's been a great resource. You give mini lectures, expanded lectures about a lot of things which we'll get into, but I think from the patient perspective, when they're using, well, you know as well as I, what's the difference between a stem cell and an exosome and a freeze-dried exosome and PRP, and so the question out of people's mouth is also, is it safe? Is it FDA approved? So these are topics that we need to kind of dissect out of it. But I'd like to start the 20 minutes we have or so with the quote by Upton Sinclair, the author, who said, "It's very hard to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it."
Oh, how true that is. Wow.
And so we see this,
quote.
Yeah, well, I think it's true. And you and I both have affiliations with companies that produce biologics, so we are not immune from this as well. But I think there is a higher calling to the truth. And that's why I like the company I work with currently, because I asked him, "Hey, do lyophilized exosomes work?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're probably 80+% viable." So he's not going to sit there just because he doesn't have a lyophilized product or a freeze-dried product and say that they don't reconstitute. They do. But as we sit here in the market, you and I have seen, and we were just talking before the show, companies that have come and gone, companies that have been led by scientists and not. And so there's a lot of shifting sands. So how can the consumer possibly figure out what company is legit?
So what I like to say is, first, it's imperative that a patient understand the difference between a pluripotent stem cell and a differentiated mesenchymal stem cell. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to start with a little story. Almost everyone recalls that we cloned a sheep. Now, I mean, that was very, very big back in around 2010, 2012, that we cloned a sheep. Dolly, right? Mm-hmm. Really amazing. And she was cloned with pluripotent stem cells. Now, pluripotent stem cells have the ability to turn into anything in the human body. And we've seen their use aggressively for things like, making additional organs, making, lenses for the eye. And that was going to be the panacea. Everyone was going to get stem cells. It didn't matter what you had, if you had lupus or if you had liver failure, if you had kidney failure, if you had diabetes, we're going to cure everything. And then it got a little quiet, right? And it got a little quiet because Dolly died of metastatic cancer at the age of 4.5. And unfortunately, Dolly had 5 baby sheep, and all 5 of her baby sheep died of metastatic cancer within a year of life.
Yeah.
And so the whole pluripotent stem cells are going to be the panacea of, eternal life. That whole movement cooled a little bit. All right. That brings me to the point of kind of this introductory paradigm. When we talk about stem cells, there are unfortunately providers whose pocketbook and companies who pocketbook depends on patients intentionally misunderstanding what stem cells are. They are not a Harry Potter wand, right? We don't just, Wingardium Leviosa, and we just elevate everybody's health, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly, because we got an IV of, quote, stem cells or exosomes, disease is cured. That doesn't happen, right? And I think there's this wonderful intentional discord. And some doctors are selling stem cells because they're selling the miracle cure.
Yeah.
But that's not what it is.
No.
If you have a complex disease process, please, for the love of God, see a doctor who's going to practice medicine. And what I mean by that is, if you have end-stage renal disease, please see a nephrologist. Please get a nephrologist's opinion, right? And if that's coupled with very bad diabetes, please, for the love of God, see a very good qualified endocrinologist.
Yeah.
Now, can you support that medical care with certain biologics on an experimental basis? Of course. Because if you have stage 5 kidney disease, what else do we have? Right?
I think that's a great way to describe it. And as you mentioned in one of your lectures in Cancun, the doctor asked you, well, what can I do for appendicitis? And you just recoiled, saying, well, appendicitis is an acute surgical or at least medical emergency. Don't start waving your wand. So I think it's a good thing. But patients do hear the miracles and they want to believe, and there's reason to believe. So if people want to understand stem cells, what pluripotent versus adult, okay, autologous versus allogeneic, they can pick up my book, Exosomes, Songs of Healing. It explains it in a simple way. And doctors can go to your Institute of Regenerative Education group on Facebook. But the long and short of it is you and I have been in this space for several years. And we know that you, as a pain management and rehab doctor, you've always looked for ways to not just cover up the pain with opioids, but to actually support the patient in alternative therapies. And I think you'll agree that we do have a real boon, a real gift. But you're right. It needs to fit into their treatment plan. You have to know, do they have renal failure? Do they have cancer? What's your plan? How are you going to know if the endpoint is good? And it's a great point. But when patients look at this, they do conflate. They say, oh, stem cells. What's the difference between stem cells and exosomes? Why should I go to Panama or Costa Rica or Cayman?
You bet.
Yeah. But let's go back to the FDA, because I get every week, as do you, oh, so-and-so has an FDA letter. And, I was just... The doctor who in Cancun, who shall remain nameless, was kvetching about her FDA letter. And so it's kind of like a badge of honor or disgrace. So the FDA rolls up on all these manufacturers and says, we don't like this, and the other thing. But from 10,000 feet, let's talk about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, right? So food, that Galen said, let food be thy medicine. And now that RFK's in there, he's trying to take out red dye number 30. They're trying to take out high fructose corn syrup. I mean, for a lot of years, there's been stuff in the food supply that's not been good. But as long as agribusiness and the lobbyists want atrazine or glyphosate in our food, it's going to be there until people act up. So I think people really underestimate the degree to which regulatory agencies are captured by corporations. And I think that was pointed out by Marcia Angle of the New England Journal of Medicine. She wrote a book how at least half of the studies in science and academia are fabricated. So I think that shocks people. And I think it shocks people because they assume that the Food and Drug Administration has our backs. And if there was something that was really working to help people with, just simple MSK or neuro stuff, the FDA would be championing that. But they really don't see that the FDA is also an organization for intellectual property. And it's pay to play. The majority of the budget is from the companies that want to spend $2.3 billion over 7 years for a 17-year patent. But, we know that most drugs and conditions are not, single pathway magic bullet prone. So the whole thing about, is the FDA approving small molecule drugs or even now biologics for the last 15, 20 years, is that really going to cure disease? So tell us what 351 and 361 was intended to do and how it's being applied in our space.
So if you've seen any of my lectures, you will hear me say the FDA is your friend. Now, that may put people on their heels. And other people want to fight me when I say that. Within the realm of biologics, we have two types of biologics. We have in-body biologics. Right? Those in-body biologics are your blood, your bone, and your fat. Out-of-body biologics typically come from umbilical cord source, the umbilical cord that attaches mom to baby. All right? Mm-hmm. Those products are all under a regulatory framework described under Section 361. Section 361, at its simplest, elementary, basic understanding is, if I have torn a ligament in my knee, right, I have missing, damaged, deranged tissue. An allograft means that I will take like tissue with like structural properties and like mechanical function, and I will harvest it and put it in place of that missing, damaged, deranged tissue.
So for example, I tear my ligament, I get a cadaveric ACL. That's what you're talking about.
That is an out-of-body or an allogenic allograft, right?
So that's a human cell and tissue product, Section 361. Great.
Correct.
But now they're applying that to something that arguably I've heard people say is a secretion. Like in non-pasteurized milk, you have exosomes. In fresh lettuce, you have exosomes. And some people are marketing plant exosomes. So, do you think that a secretion of a cell is subject to 361? Or that's not for us to decide? It's not really a cell and tissue product. It's a...
Well, what I'll say is this, all right? Yeah. Section 351 and Section 361 are different. Section 351 denotes drugs with biologic activity. Vicodin, right? I take Vicodin, it works on mu receptors, it reduces pain. That's a biologic activity. I put cortisone in my knee, I get a anti-inflammatory response, but I also get a systemic response. Meaning if I've got inflammation in my shoulder and I've got inflammation in my knee, if I inject cortisone in the knee, some of the inflammation in my shoulder may get better. If in Section 361, I put a porcine ligament in my knee for a ruptured ACL, if I have a torn rotator cuff, there's no way that that porcine ligament in my knee is going to suddenly make my shoulder better, all right? And so they have to work in that regard. The warning letters that doctors get, the warning letters that companies get, happen when they make claims and they equate a human cell and tissue product, a graft, let's say, with having systemic ability to treat disease. Meaning, if I put platelet-rich plasma, most people have heard of PRP, in the knee, and I were to claim that that's going to treat osteoarthritis, well, anyone with osteoarthritis knows that it doesn't just affect their knee. When they get up in the morning and they roll over and they feel like the Tin Man for an hour and a half before their joints finally loosen up, right? It's not just the knee that hurts. It's the knee, the left knee, the right knee, the ankles, the shoulder, the back, the hips, maybe even the neck, right?
Yeah.
And so where companies get in trouble is they want to sell more product, and the easiest way to sell product is to market to diseases that ring the bell with people. Oh, I have osteoarthritis. That's on my report. So, if you treat with stem cells osteoarthritis, I want that product. Yeah. And this is why the FDA exists in the field of biologics. They're not there really as a police officer pulling out their taser and shooting companies. They really just put up roadblocks, almost like the little rubber bumpers when you're bowling. They're trying to make sure you don't get a gutter ball. But if you are throwing the ball as fast as you can at pins, right, and hurling it down the lane, they're going to pull you off the bowling alley.
Yeah,
and
no, it's a good point. So for doctors who are kind of a little gun shy, as they well should be, you spent time defending doctors through the FDA, and you were elucidating there are different levels of adjudication. There's even hidden star chambers. So, talk to us a bit about the terms of art we can use as practitioners, like neuropraxia, general malaise. I guess you could argue, there's three main hammers that can hit you, right? There's the FTC if you go online and advertise curing of disease.
Correct.
There's the FDA if you go and say, I'm curing disease, preventing disease. They don't directly enforce, but they can get to you both through. We had one huge manufacturer that sold out their practitioners. So, you can get in trouble if the manufacturer that you buy from shares your name with the FDA and they try and shut the whole thing down. And of course, the medical boards regulate in 50 states our practice.
Sure.
So if someone says, I don't like the cut of your jib, Dr. Park, that could also bring us down. But, I think
Well,
on
but
my
they're
consent, yeah. I mean, I try and tell
they're
people
not.
this is not FDA approved, but, tell us about neuropraxia, tell us about general malaise. Why do
Sure.
you think those terms are helpful instead of saying, oh, osteoarthritis? How is that going to protect us?
Human cell and tissue products are FDA cleared. The biologic is FDA cleared. How you use it is not. Case in point, if I were to use bone marrow aspirate concentrate and I was to tell a patient, I'm going to treat your ALS by spinning those bone marrow derived stem cells down, expanding them, and then giving them to you IV, all right, you are imparting a biologic activity on a human cell and tissue product. We talked about the graft for the knee, right? A porcine graft for the knee has no biologic activity. It's not going to treat the degenerative joint disease in the knee. And so when doctors ask, is this FDA approved? It's not FDA approved. It's FDA cleared. Everyone forgets that PRP, BMAC, stromovascular fat. These are kits. They're 510K cleared kits. So the little plastic kit is cleared by the FDA. No different than, say, a 2E needle to do an epidural or a cannula to do liposuction. All right. Once you combine that kit with blood, bone, fat, now it's a biologic.
Right.
In what you claim about it to a patient, in what you market and advertise about it, right, now can either get you in trouble or allow you to practice medicine. The point is that every doctor can practice medicine. You're allowed to prescribe gabapentin for failed back syndrome. It may not be indicated for that, but you can practice medicine, right?
Yeah.
As long as it's not grossly out of the scope of your practice. Can you use a human cell and tissue product, whether it's in body or out of body, to supplement a cartilage-based defect, focally, locally? Yes, but you can't make claims about it. You can't say, I'm going to treat your arthritis. I'm going to dramatically improve your well-being. I'm going to treat your pain. These have specific diagnosis codes, diseases.
ICD-910, yes, absolutely.
ICD-910.
So the terms that you've come up with while working both from the doctor and the FDA side are neuropraxia, which is, I guess, restoring the collagen around the myelin or the nerves. General malaise is not a disease, and inflammation. So these are things that we can kind of scribble in, yes or no?
Say you have a patient that presents with numbness in their feet. There could be all sorts of reasons for numbness in their feet.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you were to tell a patient, look, we're going to treat your neuropathy. Well, neuropathy is a systemic disease. It may not be manifesting in their hands, but it's certainly affecting the nerves in their hands.
Yeah.
Neuropraxia is a specific focal defect in the outer third of the nerve. And that outer third of the nerve is dense, irregular tissue. It's actually collagen-based. As a matter of fact, it's type 1 and type 3 collagen. And so can you apply a biologic for a focal deficit in a cartilage-based structure? You can, right? You can't say that you're imparting a biologic activity and you're going to treat neuropraxia, but could you apply a human cell and tissue product to a cartilage-based defect in a peripheral nerve? You sure could, right?
I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Like, people talk about the COVID mRNA products. They were never FDA approved. They were FDA emergency use authorization. Indeed, the initial iterations are now FDA not approved, and they're trying to roll out subsequent versions. There's been some pushback because some people believe they may have done more harm than good. But I think, edit.
Sorry.
Guys. Oh, you back? Okay, we're here?
Yep.
Okay. But I think that the point that the layperson struggles to parse out is that the FDA is the big brother that protects us. And anything science-based and beneficial will eventually make it through the FDA to help us because they're looking after us. And, I don't think they see the big picture in terms of how the money flows. So we, in our personal experience with our ends of one and our patients with the miracles, we don't get out there and say, oh, I'm going to cure your disease. But on my consent, it says this is not FDA approved, not standard of care, something that people who take my online provider training course can download and customize. But it's very important to have that fig leaf. Does that mean a person can't sue you or a regulatory agency can't come after you? No. But I think it's important to realize that there is a scope of practice, and that what used to be, arguably, it's been damaged, but there was a sacrosanct patient, physician relationship. It's not like the power of attorney, which is tantamount to the power of God, but there was a relationship. And if I said to you, I want you to do deep box breathing and meditate on gratitude, I'm not practicing some kind of craziness. If I told you to drink cat poop coffee from Bali, also okay. But, people have a trouble seeing that, like something that is standard of care reimbursed, like epidural steroids, has never been FDA approved and is probably harmful according to the Concord Collaborative and scientific research. But, that's the thing. People defer to authority. And so it's very hard. It's a hard sell, but, we definitely don't want to take advantage of people that are desperate. But I think it's a fine line to walk. If somebody is the commissioner of the FDA, like Peter Marks in this region, and his mom has a problem, it's like abortion in the 40s. If you needed it, you could get it. But we're trying to walk a line where, in the 1940s, we're trying to walk a line where, these are available. Like, we don't ruin the party for everyone. It's not all about the money, but there are a lot of data points in our anecdotes, that support this. So how do
There's
you think
some wonderful
that,
anecdotes.
Yeah.
There's some wonderful anecdotes. Look, what I would suggest to a general patient is, if you're going to see a doctor who's going to, offer you a regenerative medicine application, first things first, right? What product are you using from what company? And the patient can do a simple Google search.
Yeah.
Do they have a warning letter from the FDA? All right. If they have a warning letter from the FDA, I would probably not consider using that product or seeing that provider, right?
Okay.
I mean, just a general thought in point, right? Number two, all right, understand that if you are sick, all right, no regenerative medicine application is necessary. These are all elective procedures, all right? Nobody needs a breast augmentation. Sorry. Nobody needs a breast augmentation. You may want one, but that's an elective procedure, all right? Do I think in the next 5-10 years the use of allogeneic allografts and autologous allografts will become more standard of care? And we won't use steroids. We won't use hyaluronic acid as a first course application for somebody with a cartilage-based defect in their knee, cartilage-based defect in their shoulder. I think that will happen. But right now, the studies that we have to do to get that approval process are drug studies. You have to do a drug study. And how do you do a drug study on a human cell and tissue product?
Well,
The game's a little bit rigged.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like, I was at a conference this Monday to Wednesday, and Hans Kirchstadt has a product which is the secretome of immune cells to cure muscle atrophy. But, people are like, I think rightly, and I was talking to one of the founders of the first exosome company, and they say that they're combining their phase 1 or safety with their, their phase 2 studies, 2A, because the traditional model of a small molecule billion-dollar blockbuster is not really needed here. I mean, the power analysis, the numbers you need to show a benefit are de minimis. So it's kind of a new frontier for the FDA. But again, as Upton Sinclair said, it's not Pfizer or Merck writing a check with 8 figures on it, but these companies are about at least 12 or 14 studies going through the FDA, probably more. And so they're starting to cash checks, and they're starting to think, we'll look at this. But I have the bigger question of whether someone can even own a human product. The Myriad Genetics, the BRCA1, the Supreme Court shut that down. So, the FDA is always in sort of this dance with taking money and persecuting companies. And regarding the FDA warning letter, there are a lot of companies that have come and gone, as we know, and some don't even make their own product. They white label with someone else. So how could they get a warning letter if they're just marketers? So, I think that it could be a badge of honor. You have to read the context, but I think most of the people that are trying to do this, the FDA tries to collar them. They put the electronic dog fence around them, they inspect them. So, yeah, there are a lot of reasons why I would steer away from companies. But again, nobody has the final answer. Peter Marks doesn't, and the
Yeah,
people in these labs don't.
I think Peter Marks is a brilliant man, and I think he's trying very hard to police an industry. Just osteoarthritis of the knee is a $5 to $15 billion industry a year. When there's that much money involved, and we're not talking about neuropathy or back pain or anything that's really high dollar, just osteoarthritis of the knee, five to $15 billion a year. All right, that's a lot of secondary gain, right? In one man.
Absolutely. I got a patient wrote to me about $2.5 billion market for lyophilized cosmetic exosomes from fat Korean dudes. It's like, this is big money, and people are playing this game. But unfortunately, apple juice, apple chips, they're all comparing stuff that's not really comparable. So I love the fact that you are always able to explain both at a strategic level, but at a granular level, what the actual difference is in terms of the legal language and the science. I think that's really missing. So when I write the next version of the book or the course, we're going to have you weigh in. But just kind of wrapping up the talk, what are the general things that you can tell people about regenerative medicine? I mean, we don't know where the headwinds or the tailwinds are in terms of approval, but is this something that's going to be available only overseas, or is it something that's going to be shut down in the U.S.?
I think in general, I truly believe that people think that RFK Jr. is just going to make it a panacea and everyone can get stem cells everywhere. All right, he's not going to do that.
No.
He doesn't have the unilateral authority to usurp the FDA's power. All right. Mm-hmm. What I hope happens, there's a law in the state of Utah that states that a doctor within the scope of their practice can practice medicine. And if they want to use stem cells, meaning not pluripotent stem cells, which have been illegal since George W. Bush was president, but different stem cells, right? Mm-hmm. Or they want to use peptides, or they want to use alternative therapies to try to improve the quality of a patient's life. When they've either reached a plateau in their medical progress, or there are no other options, they have the ability to practice medicine, and the medical board's not going to come after them. My hope is that becomes the law of the land, that we don't have these frivolous attacks by medical boards that are trying to make money just like everybody else, because medical boards run on investigations. That's how they make their money, right? By investigating doctors and making them go through expensive courses and things.
Sure.
What I hope is that doctors are able to practice medicine. I actually hope that the FDA keeps up the barriers so that we don't have people making crazy claims and waving magic wands and intentionally misleading patients about what the potential benefits are, right? And what I hope most is that we have more collaboration. Yeah. You have very staunch proponents of biologics, whether they're autologous and allogeneic. You have people that swear that they're awful and they're the devil. And then here in the middle, where you have all of these people that really like allogenic and autologous, they're either purely autologous or purely allogeneic, and nobody, right, wants to work together. What is needed desperately are two things. Number one, better communication between providers and better collaboration between providers. That's number one. But number two, what is needed are large-scale observational studies, not drug studies that we do with 351. Large-scale observational studies that no matter what you're using as a provider, we can compare apples to oranges, right, with the same outcome measure. I don't care if you use PRP or if you use Wharton's jelly. If you're applying it to a cartilage-based defect of the knee, which works better? We don't know, right?
We don't know. No, I think it's a great point.
Is it better if we combine Wharton's jelly and PRP? We don't know, but it would be great to know if there was a level playing field and financial interest was removed.
That's
right.
Great. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that was what you said, and what I tried to say in Spanish is that in this field, the one-eyed man is king. And as long as we keep our one eye on the prize, which is what is the truth, what works, we'll figure it out. But yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who fall prey to salesmanship and talking about numbers of exosomes. I mean, the truth is you can't even count exosomes directly, but nobody talks about that. But I think you're a voice of reason, both for doctors and for end users. And I think we need more of that, just more light and less heat. But again, like Upton Sinclair said, if a man's salary depends on him not understanding, they could be pretty obstinate. But let's wind up and just say that your Facebook page, for mainly doctors, right? You do a vetting process, is the Institute of Regenerative Education.
It is.
Provide dozens of interesting little breakout sessions. I tried your technique of the microneedling at 0.25 without anesthesia. We all loved it. So I'm going to pivot, because
I'm not that crazy, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but even a blind
I think
squirrel
there was
is
humble and very grand gesture of respect from you. Because a little crazy goes a long way.
Namaskar, yes. Well, they say a blind squirrel is right twice a day, right? So, no,
That's
but
right.
I thought the BLT, I guess it probably could be toxic to exosomes. And 0.25, we barely felt. So thank you for that. It's interesting watching you do live demos in Dubai. There were so many points at which I would have done things differently. And it just goes to prove that there's no one way to get up the mountain. There's many different techniques. And the best part of being a doctor in some ways is helping people in a way that's personalized, improvised.
Sorry.
Edit. It's edit. I think the best part of being a doctor is that we can personalize, we empathize, and we can improvise. And so things change. And that's really the fun, creative, delightful part. Yeah. All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much. And we hope to see you again at another thing, and hope to get our tequila and our mariachi on. And I really thank you. Namaskar.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you very kindly, Dr. Park. Have a blessed day.
Okay, you too.
Thanks for tuning into the Recharge Biomedical podcast. If today's episode got you thinking, you'll love my book, Exosomes, Songs of Healing. It's packed with cool analogies, full-color illustrations, and all the science you'll need to understand how exosomes are changing the game in aging and regenerative medicine. You can grab it in paperback, ebook, or audiobook, whatever works for you. Now head over to www.rechargebiomedical.com to check it out. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you next time.